I totally agree, because it has become business critical. And, AV was always nice to have, it should work, but if it didn't work, it didn't kill the business, right? It didn't look nice, but often, people didn't really, pay attention to that. But now digital signage in many, many vertical markets and many, many use cases has become business critical. That means someone needs to have ownership. And just to add what you said, also in the past was relevant to own it. Now it's relevant to have access to it. So it really doesn't matter who owns it, right? In the past, you bought something, was hang and bang, the integrator brought something, they installed, and then they forgot about it, right? And then the whole responsibility was with the end user. But the end user, they didn't have a digital signage department. They just didn't care, right? And they didn't do any updates and everything. They just didn't care. And with managed services, it's a totally different mindset, because the ownership and the whole responsibility that the installation and everything works moves over from the end customer to the MSP, to the managed service provider.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Screenly Changelog. It's Daniel and Viktor here again, and we are joined by special guest Florian Rotberg from Invidis. We have a lot of exciting topics queued up for today, and we're excited to get back into it. Where should we begin? Viktor and Florian. So for newcomers to the show, Viktor is the CEO of Screenly and co-founder, and Florian Rotberg is the managing director of Invidis, one of the largest consulting firms and probably the authority on digital signage, especially with their yearly produced yearbook that anyone in the industry is certainly familiar with. So how did you two meet? What's the background?
Must have been. I mean, there's probably an angle with Dave at some point, because they tend to always have been. Dave was on our podcast a few episodes ago. I must say, it must have been one of your events, I think. Maybe side event Barcelona, first time, possibly? Quite possibly, at least. I think so. I mean, that's where I gather.
Well, Barcelona's ICE, I guess so, right? That's what people...
Yeah. Exactly. So I think that must be the angle somewhere. But it's many years ago.
It is. Daniel, Viktor, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be on your show today. And just maybe briefly about, Invidis Consulting.
Yes.
And I mean, you said already a few words, but so Invidis Consulting, we're based in Munich, Germany. I founded the company 19 years ago. So next year we have our 20th anniversary. 2006, that was really the beginning of digital signage, when most people in the industry, not in the industry, but on the customer side, always mixed up with digital signature. So we got many people.
They still do.
We still debate if digital signage is a good word for the industry, but it is what it is.
Yeah, if you've ever run Google AdWords for digital signage, you'll find a lot of wasted ad budget for digital signature companies. I'll say that.
Absolutely. We are based here, and we have three main pillars. The one most prominent probably is our daily reporting with Invidis.de, Invidis.com, and since a few months we also took over 69, so we're doing daily news reporting about everything. Often, complement with some analysis about latest developments. A lot of M&A is happening, all of this stuff. So that's what we do in a daily business. We have a newsroom here. We have an editorial team, full employed, not some freelancers. Really, full business, because we have a consulting and editorial background. So we're really keen on having a good journalistic product. That's what we do on. We have a newsletter, which is quite prominent. So 2,500 people read our newsletter every weekday. 2,000. That's a lot. Wow. That's the publishing part. The second one is events. We do a lot of conferences, DSS events. The biggest one is our one in Munich, which roughly 500, 600 people, and it has become very international. So most of the CEOs are attending. So it's a really cool thing. It's always 2 days in May. But we also have DSS along all the Infocom events, because we have a joint venture with RAC and Avixa. And to be honest, in a few days, I'm off to India, because next week we have Infocom India. And for 3 years now, we're doing already our conference there, and it's a really cool market. If you have some time later on, I would love to speak a little bit about it. It's really, really cool. And don't underestimate India. Most people underestimate it. These guys are very smart. They skipped all the mistakes we did in the past 20 years, right? They overtook everything and went straight in there. And they invented the internet. They invented the cloud, right? When you talk to them, said, "Oh, guys, are you perpetual license or cloud?" They say, "No, forget about it. We are cloud. India is cloud." So that's really cool. So we do these conferences along all the Avixa events. Obviously, most prominent is the ISE one in Barcelona, but Infocom, Orlando, in China, in India, in Bangkok, in many, many places. And the most important one we do is our consulting work, but that's the stuff we usually cannot talk about much about it. And we do strategy consulting to all the large players in the market, all the big names you see there, most of them are our clients. Not only the European offices, but usually the head offices. So that means I travel, I spend probably every second week somewhere overseas. And we do a lot of M&A. And as you all know, the industry is, it's in a big transition currently. Consolidations going on, and we advise buyers as well as sellers, and have been involved probably in most of the larger deals you've heard about across the world. So it's a small team, 15 people here in Munich, but we're very focused, and in this tiny niche of digital signage, not digital signature, we're a well-known name. And yes, we also do something like this.
Yeah.
Yearbook.
So let's talk about the
12 years in a row now.
let's talk about the yearbook. So I mean, basically all this knowledge that you guys develop over the year and is put together is really crystallized in this one book that many people are familiar with. And for those who are not, how should they think about this yearbook? It's not a marketing pamphlet. So what should people be looking for when they get this?
Well, they should know we're Germans, right? Germans, we love to be precise, right? That's what we're known for. We can build some nice cars. They're expensive, but they usually work pretty well. So no, we're doing this yearbook now 12 years in a row. And we started because, we decided we want to have some rankings. We wanted to have one place everyone can, have access to really understand what digital signage is all about. And in the beginning, we just explained a little bit, what it takes, what are the different components. And then we said, okay, what are the latest trends? What are the latest trends in software? What are the latest trends in cloud, in hardware and everything? And so the book grew year by year. And now it's like 240 pages every year. It's published in German and English. That's the English version. And we distribute it for free. So you can download it on invidis.com for free. And we have more than 100,000 downloads every single year.
Wow.
And to be honest, as I travel a lot, I see it on many, many CEO desks. All the investors have it. Our competition uses it. AI loves it, unfortunately. We love AI so much, but as a content producer with such quality content, it hurts a lot. It has rankings in there, so you can see who are the largest, software companies, the largest integrators in various markets, and that's a world exclusive. I can announce today. Next year, for the first time, we will also cover North America.
Okay, so
in the past we have done Germany, Europe, Middle East. So EMEA, we are already quite strong. And we will now extend our coverage also to North America, so in 2026. And it's always published at our DSS event in Munich in May. We will have also a North American edition with North American listings and the latest trends, because the North American market, and Viktor and Daniel, you know that better than anyone else, in many cases it's very different to Europe.
Yeah.
And to the Middle East.
Very.
So that's what we're working on. And so that's the yearbook. You can download it for free, and that's why people love it. And some even call it the Bible of the industry. I wouldn't call it like this, but it's probably the most comprehensive yearbook you have, and all the big, integrators and all the big consulting companies, all investors, banks, they all love it.
Right.
We see who's downloading.
Right. So you heard it here first that the yearbook is not just ChatGPT slop.
Exactly.
It is actual industry analysis by real human beings.
It's printed, right?
Also,
Daniel and Viktor, it's printed. That makes the biggest difference.
True.
You can have PDF magazines as much as you want, but having something haptic, that's why the CEOs love it so much.
Right.
And it costs a heck lot of money. You won't believe, because you get it for free. The printed version only when you attend our conference. But that really the biggest difference, having a printed thing in today's time, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
It's a well put together report. I can definitely say that firsthand. It's well published. Looks good as well. It's well produced through and through. Both data and
we do everything ourselves. Every single word is written by us, not by AI. Everything is done just by ourselves, and so we put a lot of time and hard blood in it. And I think it's very thorough and very well analyzed. And so it's a good thing. Obviously, we know much more. That's what we share for free. And then hopefully, if you want more information, you can see our number.
Yeah.
We're happy to.
Well, so let's jump into some of the big topic, which is signage as a managed service. Viktor, operating Screenly, you're very much on the ground. beyond, of course, the speaking circuit and conferences, you're also interfacing with customers in real time every day. Talk to us a little bit about this, topic broadly speaking, and also maybe I don't know, some of the feedback you've had from individual customers and market participants.
Yeah, I think going back to the event in Munich this year, I forgot who said it, but I forgot the number as well. But Florian, you probably know this. There was a really good success story there, or a success metric there, on the difference between how successful a signage deployment is if it's deployed as a standalone entity or deployed as a managed service where an integrator of sorts takes over the entire network. But I think that particular thing highlights the need for signage to not be a silo, but be part of something bigger. And we spoke with Dave a few episodes ago about how kind of signage is moving into IT. I think this is part of the same movement, really, right? Where signage is becoming a small piece in a bigger wheel, right? It's an extension of IT rather than something AV team owns and operates, right? So I think that is a good thing, because when you're managing signage, at the end of the day, it's an IoT device or some kind of device that connects to your network, and it should be treated as such. And therefore, it needs to be treated as the same life cycles. So somebody owns and manages and updates it is really important. And I think that's where I see a lot of, I think we heard a lot in Munich about other companies talk about this as well, saying that oftentimes when things go down, you don't know why, because you don't have enough data. When a signage player goes down in deployment, you just know it's down. That's the only thing you know for sure. You don't know it's because somebody changed the network configuration, somebody changed the firewalls, somebody unplugged it. Having this be part of a bigger puzzle where somebody can have more data points on the network and say, oh, but hey, my other device on this network is still functioning. So therefore, we can have more point and say, maybe it is the signage player that's broken for whatever reason. But having that viewed as more holistically rather than a silo, I think it's very important, and it fits much better with enterprise IT in general. But I'm really curious about what you're hearing as well, Florian, and how you see this as well.
I totally agree, because it has become business critical. And,
Yes.
AV was always nice to have, it should work, but if it didn't work, it didn't kill the business, right? It didn't look nice, but often, people didn't really, pay attention to that. But now digital signage in many, many vertical markets and many, many use cases has become business critical. That means someone needs to have ownership. And just to add what you said, also in the past was relevant to own it. Now it's relevant to have access to it. So it really doesn't matter who owns it, right? In the past, you bought something, was hang and bang, the integrator brought something, they installed, and then they forgot about it, right? And then the whole responsibility was with the end user. But the end user, they didn't have a digital signage department. They just didn't care, right? And they didn't do any updates and everything. They just didn't care. Yes. And with managed services, it's a totally different mindset, because the ownership and the whole responsibility that the installation and everything works moves over from the end customer to the MSP, to the managed service provider, being at a traditional digital signage company, a pro AV company, or more of an IT company. Fair enough. Yeah. These IT guys knows how to use it. And that also means what to do with the hardware. Do you use the screens for 8 years, or do you replace it after 4 years and remarket it, right? So the ownership also of the hardware, is with the MSP provider, and they know much more how to get it. And in Europe, green signage, sustainability is a huge topic. Even, we deferred a little bit down the road, but it every single tender we see, it's always we're looking for the most economic and most sustainable solution. That's basic for everything. In the US, it's a little bit different, but they will catch up. Don't worry. Maybe in three years or so, whenever there's an election, or maybe we'll never have a different story. But we will go to politics, but that's a game changer.
Yeah, I think what you said there is really important. And we've had this conversation a lot internally and also with customers, which is it's not about the day 0 event where you just deploy this. It's the day 100, day 200, day 300. What happens then? Who owns that, right? And I think that's so important. In the old world of on-prem and you just leave a box on the network, that's not going to fly these days. It's not how the world operates anymore. There will be vulnerabilities. There need to be software updates, security updates. all that jazz. It can't be manual. It must be automated. Someone must own it and enforce it, right? And I think that's something that we're finally seeing conversations on.
Yeah.
And Viktor, Daniel, that's something which is really relevant because many of the ISVs, they will say, oh, it's not my job, you buy a perpetual license, I'm out of it. That's not the case anymore. It's your name on it. And it doesn't matter what contract you had at the end of the day. And we had a few security breaches a few months ago, right? With some really, really big names. They all said, oh, we're fine, it wasn't our contract, we sent them the updates and didn't install them. That's not working anymore. In today's world, it's your name on it, and you better take care of it. And if your customer doesn't, you need to do that. And that's a game changer. That's what the industry needs to understand.
Yes, and it's like that. That is something that we probably should highlight on what the event you spoke about that firmware update, right? Because there was a massive problem. People they're like, well, we posted on this knowledge base to this new firmware update. Cool, great. Who's gonna find out? There need to be OTA, there need to be management, there need to be assurances, and these probably SLA. Like we are talking internally about SLAs for security updates, like SLA from vulnerability disclosure fix to when it's live on the device on customer's prem, right? That's what we need to get to. That's not like random article with how you firmware update, right?
Well, I think that's a real tension point too, and I mean I've definitely seen that with some integrator rollouts where maybe they're used to that past paradigm of hey, you guys bought the stuff, we sent it to you, we set it up, we left, see ya, and maybe they haven't really taken the full leap into selling and packaging things as a managed service, and then when the customer is coming to them, in some cases they're annoyed, right? They're saying, oh, well, this is out of scope. This is, instead of seeing it as a real opportunity, right? Being like, hey, listen, this is a way where we can, define some terms, define SLAs, define our pricing for managed services, and have a real relationship with these customers, ongoing, beyond just the first rollout. So how do you, Florian, see how does a firm become a real winner in digital signage managed services? How does one stand out with managed signage?
You need the skills, the tools, and the financial strengths. And to be honest, the reason the industry was, so, really, had challenges with that was, most of the players in the industry are too small. You need to have a strong balance sheet because otherwise you cannot be an MSP. Because it means, you usually do it with a leasing company, but you need to do some investment. You need a certain size. You need to have a NOC, a network operations center, and a real one, right? I mean, everyone claims to have one, but we do test callings, right? I do calls at 3:00 in the morning, and I promise you, 90% of the people out there promising we have a NOC and a 24/7 hotline, it's some people in sleeping said, yeah, how can I help you, right? Because with a mobile phone at home, this is not what we call, 24/7 network operations, they just do something and something breaks, it doesn't work. And sometimes they don't even speak English or with bad accent or whatever. So it's a mindset. Primarily, it's a mindset. You need to understand that being an integrator and being an MSP, a managed service provider, it takes much, much more than just, hang and bang and doing some stuff and knowing your AV skills. It's really, you need the people, you need the finance, you need the certifications, you need the processes in your organization. It's process driven because usually your customers, your end customers are larger companies. They expect from you all the security, all the quality management and processes and certifications and everything. So all the ISO 27001, 9001, you all know them all, right? That's relevant. And if you don't have them, you cannot win new customers. Yeah. And that's why you currently see, the boys separating from the men, right? That, the vast majority of players, and that's why I'm a little bit worried, I believe the vast majority of digital signage integrators who are currently in the market, they won't be here in 2 to 5 years because the market is changing so much. With AI, not only with AI, but also moving to MSP, it takes a totally different setup and a mindset and a management and skills. And many of them are not able to do that. They know every single thing. They know Extron. They know all the things. They know how to install a screen. But it's not about installing a screen anymore. It's about managing them.
Right. I would say that traditional MSPs are a lot more, it's a lot easier for traditional MSP focusing on IT services to adopt signage than for an AV company
Yeah.
to enter the MSP game, right? An integrator to enter the MSP game, right? Because monitoring a network from a NOC is no different than monitoring signage. It's an add-on, not a world apart, right?
It's a scalable, it's scalable business. Absolutely. That's why all the big IT guys are coming in. I mean, and look at the sizes, right? I mean, Econocom, 2 billion or 3 billion revenue, right? That dwarfs all the typical digital signage integrators, with the exception of very few, right? It's really, it's a scale game, and you need to have size, and size matters, unfortunately. And that's why we see it. But on the other hand, it's good for the industry. Because industry was always, what we offered was always nice to have. Now it's becoming business critical. The big guys coming in the industry. That's a good sign. That's a really good sign. It means, we are there where we wanted to be already 20 years ago. So it's good, but it means changes for many in the industry. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think one, especially for very large enterprise deployments, one tension point is essentially the signage budget becoming what was in the past a capital expenditure to something that's part of the operating expenses with just the ongoing managed service. Do you from your consulting with some of these different rollouts, how do you see that viewed? Is that a difficulty with some businesses who are used to treating this IT as just a one and done payment, and it's not really part of their established procurement processes to have this ongoing service? Or do people like that it's maybe a smaller expense that is more predictable over time? How are you seeing that with large rollouts?
It's very interesting. The very large enterprise customers and the very small ones, they love subscription services, right? We use it. Everyone has Spotify, Netflix. So we, on our consumer level, we use it every day, right? The really large corporation, they don't buy hardware for the past 10 years anymore, right? They lease everything. Everything is as a service. I mean, every mobile phone, every notebook, everything, for many, many years, it's already the de facto standard. So for the really large enterprise, it's very simple. So we know that, we know the deal, we know everything, we know that, they can also do the math. They know it's more expensive than buying it, right? But on the other hand, they don't want all the hardware on their balance sheet. And if you buy a lot of LED walls and everything, that adds up, right? I mean, it's quite expensive. And they also want always the latest and the newest ones, right? And if you buy it yourself, then everything is on you, right? To really to make most of it. So, and the really small ones, because they're more consumer oriented, they also know it. They're fine with it. In the middle, it's a little bit different. They do the math and say, "Oh, it's getting more expensive. I would still like to buy it." And say, "Yeah, go ahead. That's fair enough, right?" Or it's not good for my credit rating. Let's face it. Also, it has an influence on your credit rating when you start, leasing all these companies, all this hardware and everything. So these are things which you need to consider. But in general, they're very open to it because it's already de facto standard in IT.
Yeah.
But one thing I'm curious about there is, when we talk in OpEx with CapEx and like leasing versus owning, one thing that is often neglected, and this is true for servers as well, because I mean, signage is not that different from like renting or buying servers, right, in your data center. It's the whole lifecycle event. Like, first of all, you have to, you have a write-off period of like 5 years, whatever it is for these devices. But then what many fail to account for is who owns that and maintains it, and what's the cost of that during that time period. I think that's what often is often missed in those equations, right? When you do that math, it's like, yes, it's cheaper, but when I lease this, it also comes with someone who takes care of it, right? And I think slightly tangential, but I think very relevant for the context nonetheless.
It depends what kind of organization you have. Do you have a huge head office where you have 1,000 screens in one location, or you're a retailer with 10,000 stores having one screen in every store, right? Then it's much. Then the leasing part and the service part is a no-brainer, right? I mean, everyone does. We have a few customers, big airports. In an airport terminal, in a bigger airport, you have usually 3,000 to 5,000 screens for each terminal, right? Yeah. They don't need it, right? They have hundreds screens spare in the basement, right? When something breaks, they have the IT guys anyway running around. That's a different story. So it really depends on what kind of industry you're in. How are the screens distributed, how many locations? That makes a difference.
Yeah. I think another back and forth in the managed service area is, I mean, here we're presenting it very much as this giving up control over your signage hardware and software as a good thing for the companies, because signage, like as we said, there isn't a digital signage department, and people don't really care that much. They care about the outcome, but not the actual logistics. And handing over that responsibility is where, okay, the industry is going fine. But the other side of that coin is that there's some giving up of control, giving up of control of the hardware, of the software. Do you find that some companies are very much in the, in that camp of, hey, we are not comfortable giving up our support and everything to this other group. We really need this to be in-house. We see this as very business critical, and therefore we don't want it as a managed service. Do you see any tension there, Florian?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but usually if someone moves to an MSP business model, it's a new tender, right? It's not buying out existing hardware. It's really when you start on a green field, right? Or you're either, the current project comes end of life, right? Or you build something new. That's how it usually goes. It's not buying out existing hardware. They provide that offer, but that's not the typical case. The typical case is really we start with something new, so then they're open to it. But then there are certain industries and certain customers for them who it's really important. They want to choose the software. They want to make sure, that they're in full control. But for the vast majority, they couldn't care less. They don't know the CMS anymore. Yeah. These are all, not the digital industry. Who knows the Scala? Who knows the VXT? Who knows the Memori? Nobody in the world, right? They know Salesforce, they know Microsoft. So it doesn't mean to them anything, right? So it's really the seal of approval comes from the MSP. The larger the MSP, it's big enough. This company, we need a big company. And this has been the case already even before MSP came to our industry. It's really, the bigger the name, the better, because I can sue them, right? That's why they love the Samsung brand or whatever. That's how it works.
Never get fired for hiring McKinsey, right? Or Accenture, right?
And you don't get fired to get hiring buying Cisco or Windows, right? That's the reason why Microsoft Windows, 95% in the enterprise use Microsoft Windows. It's not the best system, it's just like you don't get fired for that. Yeah. So in the challenge world, that means, as I don't know the ISVs anyway, most of them out there, for me, it's important. I have Econocom, CDW, Computer Center. That's a brand I know. And if they offer that to me, if they provide me the service, and I have a service agreement with them, I couldn't care less what the software is, especially as the role of CMS is changing as more data we have, right? More and more, it's not done on the player itself, but on other things. Victor, I know you have maybe a different thing, but that's why we're here, right? And that's not the case for everyone, but it's a certain trend.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to unpack that a bit further because I think that's super interesting. I was going to ask you about, because we're talking about managed signage as it's a one size fits all, but it's really not, right? Because there's a big area here, right? You kind of alluded to this. I mean, the worldview I subscribe to is that the APIs will rule the world eventually, right? The APIs will become the standard for how we do this. There's something called OpenAV. I'm not sure you've seen that. The alliance being formed. To me, this is where we're heading in that direction, right? So the CMS themselves become more of a commodity in some ways, I guess. But I'm curious about how you see it in these deployments. Are the MSPs, whether to draw the line for the MSPs, do they actually do the content creation too? Because that's usually sticking point with signage, right?
No. These tech guys, they don't know anything about content. Only very, very rarely, I would say less than 5% of the projects they do that. Right, it's not a signage as a service. It's full thing. It's more screen as a service. So if you look at our yearbook, we separate between screen as a service and signage as a service. So screen is just the managed service part. Is just we provide you a working platform with the software, with everything, but the content is yours because it's usually done by someone else, by the marketing department, by if you're in the digital home business anyway, by someone else, right? So no, it doesn't include the content. No, usually it doesn't.
Yeah. Because that's what we tend to see. The larger the company, the less they're concerned with that part of it. It's the small mom and pops that are really worried about the content piece of it. Whereas the bigger the size, they have internal resources. They just here are my assets, schedule them some way or another, and make sure they show it in the right slot.
But for the mom and pop shops, I mean, you have an out of the box thing, right? Or even a VXT, whatever, right? I mean, that's more than enough for them, right? It's good enough. Yeah. And to be honest, 99% of the CMS out there are probably good enough for mom and pop shops. Everything is better than the built-in player, but that's good enough. You can upload some stuff, you can use your Instagram content, whatever. That's usually what it is, right? Or you have a simple menu board where you don't change the content for a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough, that works well. Even the Amazon stick works. Usually we say don't use these external sticks, because they can break and they provide you with a lot of challenges, right? But they work. I mean, they work absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good framing. They're concerned about a screen for a service, and then this content for a service is something that's kind of figured out internally, or for the big guys, or for the small guys, they fight their way through it too. Another thing that's often bifurcated is the security component, where people are like, well, hey, you got a screen, that's it. And then the security component is kind of, well, who knows? Let's see. So let's transition into that for a moment. Victor, how do you see, maybe just start generally and then we can dive in, but security being a key component of managed signage. Where do you see the current positioning in the market, and where do you think it's going?
I mean, what I've seen, I've been in this industry for about a decade now, and I've been giving, a lot of people gray hair about talking about security for a very long time, and very few people cared and listened that back then. But it's all been now DNA, right? But I'm very welcome to see, it comes down to industry maturity, right? As the industry matures more and signage kind of moved from this little silo that's owned by AV into a bigger IT organization, the questions are very different that are being asked, right? People ask about things like lifecycle management. It's not just a box you drop on the network and you're done with it. Like, you start to see very different questions. And so we are seeing those questions coming through more and more. And I'm very happy that as of, the last, so I was invited last year, and this year I was able to make the Munich summit and was on a panel about cybersecurity there. But it still feels like I'm very small part of the signage industry. It's like keep banging on the drum about security, because for me, it's so important. Like, that's what we need to talk about more. And it's the whole life cycle. Like, it's day 0, but also day 100, day 200, day 300. What happened? Who owns it? Who patches it? All that stuff, right? And then, of course, the op-ed piece that I wrote on your piece, or 69, about signage players being completely out of scope for most compliance framework, I think is a massive, massive red flag for that CISOs and CTOs of any of these organizations should have nightmares from, right? And I'm curious about what you've seen on your side, Florian. I know what I've seen, but I'm curious about how you see kind of the maturity and like, are people actually going beyond, checkbox compliance certificate, but beyond that? I'm really curious about what you see from your end.
Viktor, I really like your op-ed article. It was really nice. So when you suggested it, I said that's a really good thing.
Thank you.
To be honest, security wasn't an issue even 5 years ago. Even at a tender, you just had to fill out some boxes, some check on an Excel sheet nobody really cared about. Yeah. In today's big tenders, especially for enterprise customers, it's not the enterprise customer itself, but their cybersecurity insurance doing the penetration test. And they don't go for an Excel sheet, right? They know exactly what to look for, what kind of certifications you need and everything. So that's already the biggest change. So you just cannot get through with just some Excel sheet to claim everything and don't have it, right? That's number one. Number two, even if you're certified, ISO 27001, all the other things, you need to prove on a live page that your certificate is still valid. Because also some of them, always hand it in a PDF, and tweak it a little bit, say, we're all fine. Large enterprise customers and the insurances, they want to see the live status, from the certification authority, really to look at, is it still a valid certificate? And you need more and more than you had 5 years ago. That's really important. But what's so interesting when we talk about SOC, and don't forget, probably 80% of all digital signage installations new ones run on SOC. It's really strange, but it's by far the dominating platform. There's not one SOC, we all know that. But the Chromium engine, it's absolutely essential for digital signage. We all know that. That's the most important part of these things. And when you look how old, when you buy a screen today, if you order a screen today, doesn't matter what kind of big vendor you buy it from today, you buy it, you would be shocked, and some of the end customers are shocked how old the Chromium version is. It's 2, 3, the worst, 5 years old Chromium. 5 years of Chromium. It's like 50, 60 Chromium 6, and we're now at 130 or 140 or whatever we are, right? And we all know why it is. There's a good reason why it is. But it's just not acceptable anymore. It's not acceptable. You cannot have a 5-year-old Chromium in today's world. It's just too risky. And Viktor, you have much more expertise about that than me. But this is something, even just looking at the number, they're shocked, the IT department saying, why is this Chromium 60 and we have 140? How can you explain that?
I mean, it's a funny telling sign. So a lot of signage vendors do server-side screenshotting for their signage players. And that's largely the reason, because the browsers are so old and so outdated that the only way you get a modern web page to render on a lot of signage players is to not do it at all, but render it server-side and ship a screenshot, which is terrifying. That has to be the workaround, right? So absolutely, you're spot on.
And Viktor, I think it was last year with Power BI, when they changed the minimum requirements, there was a shock in the industry because they said you need to have at least, version 100 something or so. And like 2/3 or even more of all CMS couldn't support Power BI applications anymore.
It's crazy.
They were like working around with screenshots. I mean, this is insane, right? That's not acceptable. Yeah. And so we had this wake up moment, when Microsoft Power BI decided, you need to have that because in the desktop world that's standard, right? Everyone has an updated or most pretty new browser. So the industry has waken up. It's I think less than a year ago, maybe exactly a year ago, maybe something like this. And now they all are really hectic. And the vendors always promise, we always do updates, but they never delivered. They never delivered. They always put, you get regular updates. But they never said regular.
But that's the problem with that. It's the same argument as we are secure as we are updated. Like quantify. People need to quantify and show beyond just like we are secure or we are up to date. Like, okay, but how far behind? What's your SLA for like vulnerability disclosure to fixtures, right? That's kind of like that's the next spotlight that I'm looking to see happen in the industry.
But it's improving. The big vendors they understood it and they're all working on it. And I think Samsung, they announced that they will have 2 updates every year, which is okay, right? That's
way too few.
It's a game changer, right? And the other guys are now following up on that. So we will see. But this Power BI thing was a shock moment for the industry. We're like, whoa!
Yeah. Well, I think this ambiguity and security is a big thing. People can change the HTML on their website and say whatever the hell they want anytime, but how does that actually translate to reality? And, right now we have essentially the vendors themselves and the customers, getting the market clearing rate for what's acceptable themselves and finding workarounds and ways to verify. But another player on this field is governments and legislation that's trying to address this difference and really hold people down on who's responsible for what. So one of the big things going on is the CRA. Viktor, let's talk about that. So in the EU, the Cyber Resilience Act is, people can look around the corner and see what that is going to mean for signage. Maybe for the audience, let's cue this up. What is the CRA? Who is it going to affect, and why specifically in digital signage is it important?
Yeah, so CRA stands for EU Cyber Resilience Act, and to me, it's a big push towards addressing the fact that security is a massive market failure. Security will never be rectified by the industry itself because there's very little incentive to do so. We've had the compliance frameworks. Yeah, sure, they might have raised the bar a bit, but there are so many big glaring holes in what they audit and what they cover and the scope. And I don't think you can write a compliance that is comprehensive enough to cover all possible.
Well, and often when these security flashpoints happen, the relationship between the vendor and the customer is far gone, right? So I think that's another point.
Yeah, but long story short is that essentially trying to put the onus on companies selling software and hardware into the European market and raise the bar for what's called supply chain security, essentially. And the idea is basically that you can no longer ship devices that are poorly designed, insecure. It doesn't go all the way towards some of the most extreme compliance framework. There's something called secure by design or secure by default in some implementations, which is kind of, I would argue, as a gold standard for what the best possible security posture looks like today. But it's enough that it's going to be a very big headache for a lot of companies out there selling software to the European market. And for timeline-wise, this was it was drafted by the EU, I believe, December of last year, and it gives the member states now, I believe, a 24-month window to write the legal implementation of this in their member states. So we don't exactly know what it's going to look like until that's done, but we know what the EU side of things are saying, and that will largely mean that a big part of it is saying, what's in your software? What's this black box that you just sold me? Tell me more. I don't want to know it's a black box. I want to say what actually goes into this. Equivalent of the recipe list for a chocolate bar we buy. What's inside this chocolate bar? It's the same for software.
Yeah.
So that's called software bill of material, or SBOMs for short. To me, that's a big part, because then you can no longer hide behind a flag that says I'm secure, but actually you need to prove it. That's, for me, that's
yeah. And so, Florian, how do you see, talk about the CRA in particular, or just security?
And Germany.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, sorry. Germany is the first one to actually publish their implementation or interpretation of this, right? So, I'm really curious about your interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, do you see this as like a necessary intervention for market failure, or is this overstepping and making a set of rules that companies are going to over-optimize for, and neglect other things that are maybe more important on the ground? Is this welcomed in the digital signage industry? What do you think?
It's not welcome because it's cost. Let's face it. But I think it's necessary, and the time is exactly now. Because, with all the changing world out there, with all the new threats, we thought, we had passed after 1998, and the world has changed dramatically. And, Viktor, you live in Europe, we live in Europe, it's life has changed a lot. And IT security has become very important. Resilience has become much more important. The large customers, they're even struggling using Google Cloud, AWS, and Microsoft, right? I mean, we're in a world, which was unthinkable a few months ago, right? I mean, that, they're now looking all for a plan B. Have a European cloud, with French or German, and the same with all, all the code and everything. We are in a different world. We woke up in a different world. And it's absolutely necessary. And to be honest, living in Germany, being close to, or a lot of, foreign, security services are trying to, find out information here. And we have so many clients. Nobody talks openly about it, obviously, but really big companies, they all struggle with it. The only thing everyone talks about are the drones. Funnily enough, we have foreign drones, and they're supposed to be from Russia or whatever, flying over, industrial areas and everything, our highways and everything. So this is stuff you can see. This is the only threat you can really feel. The other threat you don't feel, but we hear it from all over the place. So I think it's really, really relevant. But I think for the signage industry, because the vast majority of the new entries are built on AWS cloud native things, or Azure or so, they take containers. And for them, it won't be that difficult because they're taking containers anyway and put them together. So Microsoft, Amazon, and Google will take care of that for them. But for the more established, the older ones, with a little bit dated tech stack, for them, it's the worst news they could get, right? I mean, this material of bills, Viktor, as you call it, right? This is something, where should they start, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they have developers in Ukraine, in India, in wherever, most of the companies went bankrupt already, right? So, or freelancers, they don't know. There's no real reporting about anything. Yes, they have the code, but they're missing all the integral part of it.
Yeah, I was co-leading one of the CISA, who's one of the authorities on this stuff, the working groups there. And my co-lead there, he is doing security at Lockheed Martin. And they deal with code from the 70s, and being compliant with these things with source code from like the 70s is non-trivial, right? So it's maybe not as extreme in the signage world, where you hopefully don't have signage from the 70s still running, but
Victor, let's look at the Scala code. I'm not sure about that.
yeah, maybe yeah, fair
Not
enough.
the 70s, but you know what I mean, right? I mean, and nothing against Scala, but it's just, a few companies are very low on the market, and they never, so they have some old stuff. But on the other hand, maybe that's the necessary push also for them really to move to a new tech stack. Maybe it gives the last push they needed for that.
I think it's one of these things that we do need it's an intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to wake up and face the music, and like, it's time to get our ducks in row and actually start taking these things serious, rather than just try to cover it up with some over the banner of having some compliance framework while adhering to some compliance framework. So for me, this is very important, and I do think it's going to be very painful for a lot of companies out there. I think there's no way of sugarcoating that, right? It will be painful, but it's because they've been neglecting it for so long. If you would have not neglected it and actually paid respect to it over time, it would have been far less painful and a far less bitter pill to swallow today.
Do you think? I mean, so any digital signage solution, it's a complex, stack of components and companies and hardware. Do you think that with legislation like this, companies are, even say they have their SBOMs all sorted out and everything, do you think they're really able to assume the responsibility and liability truly? Or do you think there's situations where they're just saying that they are and kind of crossing fingers that nothing bad happens in order to meet the demands of these rules and regulations that maybe are a little out of touch with, how these things are actually built? I mean, it's one thing to say that, you're going to take responsibility and about this manufacturer somewhere in wherever, but does that have any real grounding in reality, but beyond the person just wanting to be able to give the thumbs up to the regulators?
Daniel, absolutely. There are always, black sheeps around, right? I mean, there are always companies who try to get through with it. But we will have certifications. We will have some form of, proof, that you comply with that. And it won't be your mother handing you over the deal, right? It will be some, being in Germany and being the EU,
Mm-hmm.
there will be some intra-government or private organization which need to testify, that you comply with it. So I think this will be solved pretty fast. I'm not worried about that too much.
I mean, to add some colors to that, I know for a fact by speaking to quite a lot of people in the SBOM world over the last year and a half, one of the biggest reasons why companies do not want to engage yet and have kind of like tried to push back on this is because it would give them evidence that they already know. But before they have this, they have plausible deniability. But now all of a sudden, you have no longer plausible deniability. Black and white. You are insecure. You already knew this, but now there is proof, and you can no longer deny it. And I think that, particularly in the enterprise world, everything tends to be a blame game or like deniability or proxy game, right? So I think that is a large part of it as well, why there have been major pushbacks, probably in the industry, this signage industry as well.
Yeah. Well, so another thing to actually have all that roll out in reality, and you mentioned this at the start of this security conversation, Florian, is, hey, a lot of this isn't welcomed by the industry because it just jacks up the cost. Okay, fine. I think that's one conversation to have that with digital signage providers, right? Like, they know they should be investing more in security, and okay, when they're finally get their feet held to the fire, they do it. It's another thing talking about those cost issues with the customers. So especially maybe in a setup where they're not used to paying for proper security, or they thought they were getting the security already at their cheaper price points. So now these companies, to actually have the proper security they need, making those investments, somewhere that money has to come from somewhere. Talk to me about how do you think that's going to be taken from the vantage point of the consumer? Is it going to be welcomed where it's like, oh, wow, thank you. We're really happy to hand you more money because we're getting more security? I don't think that's going to happen. So how can companies frame this? I don't know. Let's talk about the added cost when the consumer sees it.
I think the ISV needs to swallow that cost. The end customer won't be willing to spend extra on that. If it's mandatory to provide your software with a form of security in the EU, sorry, that's the cost of doing business. I'm not willing to spend extra on this one. And between the three of us, I think the ISV will and they're able to swallow that. For me, it's access to the market. If you really want to be successful, if you want to play with the big guys, that's something you need to provide. There's no way around it. You cannot charge another €2 per client per month to the customer for that. Because you should be a business, right? If you don't.
I mean, this is true. But I mean, Victor, you think about it, is on the ground, trying to implement this. It's like, okay, great. Well, we should eat the cost and affect the margins. Like, it's one thing saying that; it's another thing doing it, right?
But this is why security has always been a market failure, right? Because nobody's willing to pay. Give a stupid end user example. You buy a smart insert blank, a smart thermostat. You as an end user or consumer, you wouldn't pay $5 a month to make sure that device is secure, right? That's not going to happen. Yeah. You're not going to pay a subscription service for that. So that cost needs to be passed on somehow the cost needs to be passed on somehow and baked into the price. So, I think the real cost, my gut feeling is that the real cost here is not with the ISV. The real cost here is going to be with the cloud, with the signage vendors. They are the ones going to have added cost, right? Which I guess can be taken from the line items and eaten up by the ISV, right? But the real cost, yeah.
And Viktor, you can hide it somewhere. You can package it, right? Yeah. When you talk about MSPs, you have one price which includes everything: your hardware, your software, your services. It's easy. That's why the industry loves the MSP business model. You can wiggle around it a little bit. Some are really keen on very low hardware. They're really, so you can play around with it. So if it's €1-2 per month or 50 cents, you can hide that. That's not a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Does it eat up margin somewhere else? Yes, it does, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about, but there's enough room for that. I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. No, but. Yeah, it's a welcome change from my end.
Yeah. Well, Victor, let's just tie this together with, you've done a lot of work in the SBOM arena. For a lot of these security frameworks, that's part of it. What's in the chocolate bar? In your experience with SBOMs, in the digital sign industry or otherwise, how are those actual implementations? You talk about people being worried about publishing what they know and getting a timestamp on that. Maybe there's also some component of not wanting to share the tech stack and essentially like secret sauce. For digital signage companies who are needing to properly get their SBOMs in order, where are the main points there that are a sticking point and or maybe just kind of like mindset shifts that need to happen?
Yeah, let's prefix this with CRA is much bigger than SBOMs, but it's one of the biggest sticks in the whole SBOM, in the whole CRA, in my opinion, at least. Now, the question of how difficult or easy this is you're gonna hate me for this, but I'm gonna give you the consultant answer, which is it depends, right? And it really depends, because if you're on a very modern software stack, if your software stack
because I heard you can't just put it into ChatGPT, make my SBOM. It doesn't really work.
Not quite how it works. No, for context there, the SBOM for your software can change every time you build it. Basically, depending on the software stack you're using, which means that it's a living document, not a one-off. So this whole, if you're talking about Samsung who do 2 releases a year, sure, easy enough. But that's only one part of their software, right? Because they still have a backend that ties to that, which I would hope gets deployed more than twice a year. So every time you deploy, you have a new document, essentially, or documents, I should say, because if you have even a small to mid-sized signage company, you're not going to have one monolith, or you're unlikely to have one monolith that runs everything. You're going to have a signage player. That signage player might have multiple components. Each of those components will have a separate SBOM. Your backend, you might have a microservice architecture. You might have 20, 30, 40, 50 different microservices. All of them individually will have an SBOM. So the management layer becomes kind of complex. And that's one of the pain points that we discovered when we started doing this at Screenly, is that actually the pain point is not generating them. That's a pain point itself, and how to generate high quality ones. But it's the whole, how do I, now that I've generated them, how do I share them if they can change on a daily basis? How can I share with my stakeholders? That's a much bigger problem that people run into there, which is a problem you probably don't realize until you start doing it. So I think that's a big part. But generating SBOM can be super easy, right? It can be very, very easy to do it for a single part. But that assumes that you have a very modern software architecture, and actually you know all the dependencies in your software. You have them locked down, or pinned, as you call, right? So if you have that and you have a clean house, and I think this is why a lot of the legacy firms are terrified of this, because I know from speaking to a lot of people in the embedded world in general, it gives you nightmares to understand how some of the software is built. Because like when you talk about like how a software release or a firmware is built, it's like, yeah, it runs on Bob's machine over here on his desk. That's how we build our firmware. Nobody really knows what goes in there, but it's the only way we can build our software, right? And this is like, it sounds like a joke, but in the embedded world, that is something that you hear often, right? And if that's your way of deploying firmware, oh, you're up for a world of pain, because if nobody even knows how to rebuild Bob's machine in the first place, or how it's built, because Bob will left the company 5 years ago, didn't document anything.
Right. Yeah. Well,
that's not fun.
Victor's going to be kicking and screaming here because we got to cut you off from security. So this is a big moment, but we're coming up on the hour here, and I do want to kind of widen things a little bit. It wouldn't be a proper episode if we don't mention AI. So, Florian, I think we'd really like to hear some of your insights on this. Specifically in the context of the recent yearbook publication. But let's talk about the impact of AI and digital signage as it is right now, right? I mean, I think that's where a lot of these conversations become meaningless, where it's like, oh yeah, well in the future you can do anything, right? And it's like, okay, great, thanks. We heard that point before, but like right now in digital signage, what are some of the real value delivering use cases that you're seeing, in the next a year? Where do you see this, in terms of real hands-on, on the ground implementation of it, not just the theoretical possibilities?
Daniel, well, thanks for asking for AI. Yeah, it's a big thing for the industry, and has various impacts. One of them is coding. We all know that. I mean, really, it's really transforming, how you code software nowadays. So that's where everyone uses it already. Gen AI is a different thing. That's more in the generating new content, right? That's a very simple one that works very well. But we believe the magic is really agentic AI. That's really, once agentic AI really gets off the ground, that's really where signage can play a huge role. We see already a few examples how it's integrated, not really rolled on a bigger scale, but that's really where we believe agentic AI will be the game changer for how signage is integrated into user experiences, into customer journeys and everything. That's really, really relevant. Daniel, your questions, where do we see it already? Yeah. We see it already in device management. Some really smart solutions. We saw it in Infocom US. Some of the really large software players. That's the reason why I believe size matters and the big guys are winning. They have the right to win. You know how this discussion, right? It's really because integrating AI into your solution takes a lot of work and takes some really smart AI guys, and they're very expensive to hire. So we saw some really big ones in the industry. We did a discussion with them last fall, and they said, yeah, we think about it, and they just hired 20 AI, engineers, and within a few months, they created something which is fully integrated in software, not something added on and where you have to change Windows and go to ChatGPT and back and everything, but fully integrated where it monitors hardware, it detects, it identifies certain potential problems, it detects that, it gives recommendations and everything. That's really, really smart. The second one is we saw it especially in corporate communication projects where you have a lot of data. In corporate communication project, internal ones, you have all the data from all the backend systems and everything. So you can really draw the data and you show, if you have open desk policy, you place, people from one department in one certain area. So you know exactly that's the marketing department. So the screen next to it, you show corresponding content, right? You have, CO2 sensors in meeting rooms where you see all the air quality is bad, for the next 2 hours, you cannot book this room, right? And bring this all together. This is where AI already today makes a difference.
Yeah.
What AI will do tomorrow, we don't know, but it will be transformative.
Yeah, true. Well, we'll leave it at that. So to find out what happens tomorrow, you got to get the next year's publication of the yearbook. So, Florian, thanks so much for joining us today. Really a pleasure talking to you and hearing your insights. I mean, I think Viktor and I often are very much in the weeds with at Screenly and doing these one-off dealing with the customers and in the trenches, but to get some affirmations and criticisms and discussions with the 30,000, 40,000 foot view, I think that's always important to have. So Florian, where can people find you, learn more about what's going on in Florian's world? Is it check in once a year on the yearbook, or what's the best places for people to learn more?
Invidis.com, 69, all the big shows in India next week, but obviously ISE is coming up, the biggest show in February. So around the world, just Florian Rotberg, and find me on LinkedIn. So you can find me in many, many places.
Perfect.
And was a pleasure being a guest today. And maybe we can continue in a few months, right? I mean, there are so many more topics we can cover. So let's follow up on that.
All right. Well,
we'd love to. Thank you,
all
Florian.
right. Thanks,
Have a good
everyone.
one.
See you on the next
Cheers.
one.
Thank you, guys.